Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to give people just one more minute to log on and then we will get started. So we're going to be silent for just a minute, but we will get started in a second. All right, we're going to get started. Welcome everyone to today's webinar, How to Digitize Your Business Post-Pandemic. I know that Zoom fatigue is a thing and you have your choice of webinars, so thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you all logging on. I'm Amanda Cook and I am a marketing director for And Marketing, and I will be your host today. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. All of you are muted so everyone can hear the presentation clearly. If you would like to join via phone, you just have to select phone on your GoToWebinar audio panel and the telephone information will be brought up for you. So if you prefer that method, please do that now. You will also have opportunity to ask questions throughout this entire presentation. Please put them in the questions box. Please don't be shy. We want to answer them as we come to them and stay on topic. So we will also give you this presentation following the webinar in your follow-up email. You can also click on it in the chat box as well if you want to follow along with yourself. I'd like to introduce our speakers today. Our first is Robert Pozesky. He leads RKL's operations consulting practice and the manufacturing and distribution industry group. He helps clients ranging from small family businesses to Fortune 100 companies. They accelerate their business transformation and growth through improved execution. Next, we have Rajat Kapur. He is the founder and managing director of And Marketing. He strives to provide growing business of all sizes, unparalleled marketing strategy and execution services. He brings over 2 decades of experience in marketing, sales, and strategy development, and that spans for both B2B companies and B2C companies, Fortune 50, midsize, and startup companies. And we saved the best for last. We have Erica Quigley, the founder and managing director of Poka-Yoke Solutions. She's also the author of Business Process Flow Mapping Succinctly. She specializes in creating cohesiveness across company departments through efficiency and technology. Erica was previously the director of global supply for Freedom Pay, and she was responsible for building the supply chain infrastructure to support their global expansion. So those are our speakers today. We are going to expect out of this presentation how the pandemic has accelerated this mega trend, which I don't know about you, I didn't know it could go any faster than where it was before. So we'll discuss that. We'll talk about the benefits and risks of this, as well as the revenue and operations impacting your business. We're going to kick it off with Bob in a minute, but before we do, we want to get your feedback right off the bat with a poll question to gauge where we're at today with everybody. So here's your first poll. You should see that on the screen. Which of these reasons are most important for you? Is anybody, are people seeing the poll question by chance? There we go, okay. What's the most important reason as you learn to digitize your business? Is it already part of your strategy? Are you relatively new and want to learn more? Or have you had to adjust because of COVID-19? So we will give everybody a chance to do that in 1 second. Looks like we have quite a few people who have voted already, so I'm going to close that. Looks like most people say that digitization is already part of your strategy. So Good to know. Good to know not too many people have been affected by COVID-19, but maybe there's some. All right, perfect. Great. This information will definitely help us as we present the rest of this for you. Bob, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, Amanda, thank you. Welcome for everybody for coming today. You know, those poll results are going to be really interesting as we weave these throughout our conversation. I think all of us are going to touch on that a little bit, but it's safe to say that technology is nothing new for anybody who's been around business for any period of time. You know, we go back to the mid to late 90s where technology really started to be applied end to end in all kinds of businesses and industry segments. And that's done nothing but accelerate by leaps and bounds over the last 2 decades. You know, it's embedded, it's expected. I mean, we've got kids that are growing up on tablets and cell phones. It's an expected part of business today. And if our businesses aren't leveraging technology and increasing our investments in technology and aligning that with our strategic business results, then we're just falling behind here. The cool thing about the digitization or technology strategy is it allows anyone to compete with anyone else. So small and medium-sized businesses can compete against those Fortune 100 and global companies that sometimes the 3 panelists here work with. But what has changed, and that small percent of people in that last polling question, that last polling answer, things have definitely accelerated, right? We went from normal everyday life to working from home literally overnight in March, at least for those of us here in Pennsylvania in the Mid-Atlantic region. But what we've learned over the last couple of months is working with our partners and our customers is that our location really isn't that important anymore. Technology allows us to serve customers, work collaboratively, and look for new business opportunities all over the place. And really what customers and clients are asking for is, can you provide what I need? Do you have the skill set and the infrastructure to support that? I think everybody attending today is probably falling into one of these categories. So let me move on to the next slide and talk about how I define a digital strategy. Yeah. Digital strategy is really nothing more than applying technology to improve business performance. And the thing that makes it unique, your specific strategy for your organization. What technology you're going to apply and how you're going to apply it, and what business results you're trying to drive. It's what business results you're trying to drive or that you need to drive in its short term and the long term. And just like any other strategy, you need to have a short term and a long term vision and a roadmap for getting there. So if we go back to the adoption of technology across the organization, and this applies for manufacturers, distributors, healthcare organizations, retail sites, service providers like us, the adoption of technology usually starts with some backbone infrastructure within the organization that we see in those silos underneath your organization part of this graphic. And it really starts typically with tracking financial transactions, reporting good financial measures so that we can make decisions about growing our business. Where we typically go next is engaging with customers, handling customer relationships, handling customer interactions and engagement, orders. Again, if we're in the healthcare area, it's a patient encounter. If we're in a retail site, when a customer walks into our store or hits our e-commerce site, how do we handle that? And typically, the next evolution of this digital strategy is within those silos in your organization. Folks are looking for to build efficiencies and improvements. And that's where the next level of ROI is. But what we're trying to talk to today is really getting to that next level of digital ROI, especially now recognizing that a lot of folks might be constrained from a cash or a debt perspective and not really being able to go out and find new technology. I think it's imperative that if you're making that investment, or if you're going to try and get the most out of the current technology that you have in place, that you need to align it with the best strategy possible to get you the ROI that you're looking for to help your company grow and survive and really compete coming out of this pandemic. And the further up you go on the strategic scale, where you're linking customers to your organization, to all those internal silos and your suppliers or external partners, if you can start looking at the strategies and the technology opportunities up at that level, that's where you're going to get your economies of scale out of your technology. I think too often in preparing for today's session, the panelists, we've had conversations that folks are going with one-off solutions. They're looking at all of these, what can I do for mobile? What can I do for a CRM or a customer portal, or financials or my human resources system? What can I do to maximize that? But the key here is eventually, as you're building these systems up, they become unwieldy, and the integrations and that flow of data and that flow of communication and streamlined process that we're looking for really breaks down. And what I really think you should be doing for your digital strategy is asking, how do I make it easy for folks to do business? Let's jump ahead to the next slide and I can get into that in a little more detail.
Sure. I think we actually have a question that you might be able to answer now. It must be appropriate. How do you know when to make an investment?
Great question. Usually it's going to be when you're not getting the business results. It could be the lack of efficiency that I talked about at that front end in any of those silos. But realistically, it's when you've come up to a growth roadblock in your organization. And the challenge there is identifying where, out of all these potential technology points in your organization, where the root cause is, where the problem is that you need to solve. So stepping back and understanding what your strategy is and assessing all of your technology usage in relation to that strategy usually helps you identify where your next investment should be.
Thank you.
All right, so I was talking about ROI and trying to drive the technology applications in your organization up a notch or two. Because what we're trying to do in terms of efficiencies is really essentially build free capacity for growth within our organization. We know technology can enable us to do transactions, to do design work, to do everything that our business does just a bit faster and easier. I think one of the keys for growth in a digital strategy is making it inherently easy for customers to do business with you. And I would push the definition of ease of doing business as far as you can. There are some clients and customers that just want to go online, order things remotely, get an automatic status report, get their invoice automatically, make an electronic payment, and, even in complex situations where we've got to share, say, design information back and forth, if you're in construction or if you're in the manufacturing world, they just want to submit that all automatically, have it integrated into your system, and receive the product. Because working with you is not how they make money. They have their customers that they have to serve. So what we want to do is take away their roadblocks. Internally, what it does is it allows us and our teams to make better and faster decisions and communicate more effectively. And ultimately, all those things build to a competitive advantage and allow us to have a foundation for growth. There are a couple of risks that I want to point out before turning it over to Raj. Go into this warily. If you've done technology implementations, you probably understand that 75% of these never achieve the ROI that the companies are looking for. We all know there's a lot of money that goes into spending in investing some of these projects, but more importantly, there's a lot of time that your team is going to be putting in place to do this effectively, which can be a potential distraction from their day-to-day business and serving customers and working with one another. And really, this is where I want to dissuade you from doing this ad hoc approach and just bolting on technology solution and app on top of one another. Because I've worked with 3 or 4 clients in the last 6 months alone who have really done this digital snapshot of what their technology implementation looks like, and it looks like a Rorschach test on a piece of paper. It's not clear, and there's no clear vision, and they've really distinctly decided to step back and say, I want to go to 2 or 3 software packages to replace sometimes upwards of 20 different tools. So that's why I think use that previous slide as a starting point, and make sure you pick the right partners. Most softwares out there that are reputable and been around for a while will get the job done. Sure, there's nuances between functionality. What I really do when working with clients and implementing technology is focus on the implementation plan and the experience and the success rate of those teams. And then, of course, there's the whole managing the engagement internally to set expectations and making sure there's this balance between day-to-day responsibility and the special project. So, whatever.
Bob, we do have a question because related to some of the risks that you've mentioned. It says, what if I am unable to make an investment in new technology?
Yeah, I think a lot of folks are in that situation nowadays, and honestly, for the three of us on the panel today, I think it's our default approach to try and get the most out of what's currently used and implemented in an organization. Most times, 70% of the time, an organization is going to fall into the situation where we haven't implemented it completely effectively. So there's huge opportunity to just, make some improvements, and I guess we call it a re-implementation. It's nowhere near as long and painful and time consuming as the original implementation. So sometimes within 3 to 4 months, we can get some significant improvements out of your current technology.
So you bring up a good point on this next question. It says 70% is really high. So what do you need to do to ensure that there's success?
Yeah, absolutely. It's have that strategy. So I'm going to basically repeat part of my presentation here. So just thanks whoever provided that question. It's have that strategy. Take that step back and look at what your implementation is. Do you have 3 really effective software and technology implementations in your organization? Or are you nearing that point of 20 where things are getting cluttered and inefficient? So step back, take that snapshot, maybe use that previous slide as a worksheet to sketch out what you look like. Understand what your short and long-term business performance needs are. Target your investments around those short-term needs or re-implementation of the technology around those short-term needs. Find the right partners and commit the right amount of time, and just honestly manage the heck out of it internally. I really don't understand. I've seen folks get to the point where 6 months into a major ERP implementation, folks get exhausted. They throw up their hands and they say, just replicate what I had 6 months ago. This needs to get across the finish line. And all the investment goes out the window, and we never have time to go back to do it again.
Yeah.
Just a couple points of advice there.
Right.
Yeah, let me jump in. So Bob, agree with everything you said. And so, the sales and marketing angle of this, I noticed on the introductory survey, there's kind of 2 groups of people. About half the group said digitization is already part of my strategy, so that may be a little bit more advanced. And then about half the group is still learning, or maybe has been severely impacted by COVID. So I'll try to talk both at a 101 level of people who are trying to do the basics, and then a little bit more advanced for some of the other people. And I want to be really clear before we go into specific examples. It's not bad to be still adopting these technologies. I am constantly shocked that even in 2020, so many businesses haven't done so many of these different things. So obviously it's impossible to talk about the front end commercial part of the business, sales and marketing, without acknowledging that because of COVID, everything has changed, right? So networking and trade shows have changed, probably, possibly forever, at least for a number of years, right? The elbow bumps have replaced handshakes and showing up, and social distancing and wearing masks and those things obviously are impacting every relationship that we make. The bright spot of this is that virtual networking has totally become the norm. And for those who have been willing to adopt new technologies and try out new things, I would say that they're getting ahead pretty quickly, and those laggards are falling further behind. So I'm a little surprised when I hear from people that say, oh, I can't make contacts, oh, I can't reach out. What I find, both as a person who runs a company and does sales, and a person who does marketing for other companies, is how easy it is to make new relationships in this new digital world. If you get an introduction, if you go to a networking event that's virtual, it's almost set up as a great equalizer to go do those things. So I think at a very high level, that is certainly a trend that we're seeing. And then as we think about a little bit deeper, in the past, and Amanda, you can advance the slide. And I think in the past 3 or 4 months, the biggest trend that I'm seeing is that as a business owner, as a person who runs a marketing company, we have been inundated with requests of companies at the small end and in the mid-market who are waking up and realizing that they were significantly behind on their digital footprint. So that's the #1 trend that I've seen. I did the rough math. I think in the last 3 or 4 months, I've gotten more requests for new websites and digital lead generation programs and CRMs than I had probably in the last 3 years combined. And so that's how big a trend I think this is. And it really is a flashpoint of activity. So let's go from, at the kind of the basic level. I think the first thing is your digital business card, right? Your website. As most people know, and if you don't know, you should know that as you're making professional relationships in this day and age with your sales and marketing teams, the first thing somebody's going to do is go to your website. The second thing they're going to do is they're going to look you up on LinkedIn. So your digital business card needs to be strong, right? It needs to be a necessity. I would say that's a very basic. A second pretty basic thing when we talk about digitization and technology is having some sort of a basic email marketing program, CRM, marketing automation, or some program like that to automate the things that you're supposed to be doing. I am continually surprised that in 2020 that reasonably sized companies don't have a CRM implemented. Bob, I might add to something you said a little bit earlier is how do you increase your chance of success and not be in the 70% that fail? You have to realize that when you're trying to get people to change behaviors, it's a change management problem. It's not a technology problem. So you have to change human beings' behaviors. And if those human beings have been around a long time, have been doing the same things for years, have been using paper and pen, to get them to use these electronic systems is a change management problem, not necessarily a technology problem. The technology is there. The price of that technology is crashing, so it's accessible to smaller and smaller companies. I would say that's probably the second on the basic side. The second trend here in the middle, digital lead generation, I think it is absolutely exploding right now. LinkedIn has done a phenomenally good job during the pandemic as becoming the water cooler for everybody that's working home. Content is on the rise, lead generation is on the rise. We've done a ton of lead generation programs on LinkedIn, specifically targeting prospects, led by really good content. Those are really popular. So driving thought leadership is really good. The one caution I would give everybody, no matter what level you're at, is if you're using LinkedIn, if you're using email marketing, lead with value and thought leadership. Don't be salesy. Now is not a time to be overtly salesy and spammy when you're trying to tell people about your product or your service. It's a time to build value. It's a time to build relationships and go at it that way. The third one is a little different, the online communities piece. So one of the trends I'm definitely seeing is the emergence of free or paid communities where experts can share educational content, create communities, create sharing within their communities. So if I was to kind of recap that whole thing, it's, start at the basics, do them really well. And then as you advance, think about the ways that your customers are really interacting in a different way and try to address their emerging needs.
Great, Raj, we have a question actually. Can you elaborate on LinkedIn and how to leverage that platform more?
Yeah, so I think LinkedIn is a phenomenally good tool, and I think most people were worried when Microsoft bought it because they thought they would screw it up. And I actually think they've done a great job, which is surprising to have a behemoth acquisition end up that way. So LinkedIn has gone from, in the old days, LinkedIn used to be a place you went to go get your next job. And that's totally different now. So I think there's really a couple of things to think about. So again, at the most basic level, the free tools that exist on LinkedIn to share information, to make contacts, to reach out to people, to get introductions, that basic tool should be a mandatory for everybody in sales and marketing in your organization. Point blank, it's a mandatory, if not everybody in your organization. So getting some education. We have a great friendship and partnership with a woman named Bryn Tillman. She is the LinkedIn expert, and she helps business development executives do that. And she has written books about the process called social sales. The additional part that I might add answering that question, Amanda, is really about paid targeting. So LinkedIn's tools, whether it's Sales Navigator, whether it's retargeting, whether it's doing advertising on LinkedIn, that tool is second to none to find a B2B audience. You can have somebody's email address, you can have their title, you can have their location, their geography, or maybe 50 other factors to find those decision makers and get your content and information in front of them. So there's a lot of tools that most companies aren't tapping when it comes to LinkedIn.
Thank you. We are going to hear from Erica in just 1 minute, but we want to keep you on your toes. So we're going to share another poll really quickly. So if you could just take a minute and fill out the poll about how COVID-19 has influenced your company to advance technology investments. So we have a couple of options there. If you could take a minute to fill those out. I know I'm catching you off guard.
This will be interesting, Amanda.
I know. Let's see how many people are paying attention. I only see 50% voted, so let's see. Oh, it's getting up fast now.
Because you called everybody out.
I know. All right, just a few more minutes. Seconds, not minutes, seconds. All right, we're gonna close this poll and I will share the results. It looks like 43% are looking to make technology investments. So there you go. Erica, do you want to kick it off now?
Yeah, it's really interesting, that question. And part of what I want to talk about here is how you can avoid becoming that statistic that Bob mentioned and how you can get started. So driving internal operations, like Bob mentioned, often well, first of all, there's so many different systems out there. You might have an idea of something you want to do. You type it into Google to see what system you want to use, and pages and pages and hundreds of pages come up. And a lot of times that's where people might stop, because they're like, after looking at the first 2 or 3, you don't even know what your requirements are anymore, because you're like, oh, it'd be cool to have that, and it would be cool to have this other thing, and you can get stuck there. So when you're looking at systems, think that systems should complement your work. They shouldn't become a stressor. They shouldn't, like Bob mentioned, implementing separate and disparate systems. While initially you might think there's all of this different technology and you can do so much with it, what ends up happening is there's too many places to put information, and the disparate systems probably don't communicate with each other if you don't have an overarching digital strategy on how to make them communicate with each other. And then you'll have one team or one set of employees using one system, and then another team that can't quite get the information out of that system for what they need, and they have to re-enter it. And when there's too many places to put information, that's a common thing I see. So what's the best way to use, and how do you know how to decide on a system? List out your requirements. Basically, I like to start with this because then you don't go down the rabbit hole of looking through that search of all of these different systems and trying to decide what sounds the best. I like to start with listing out your requirements, like on a spreadsheet, and the things that you know it absolutely has to do and what you want to accomplish, and what are the things that would be those nice to have or those really cool things that if your system could do this, that would be neat too, and maybe something you would implement down the road. And then across the top, I'd rank out what are other systems that people in my field, that other companies in my field are using, what does show up in the top results, so that you can evaluate those systems against each other. And then basically you look down your list and you say, and I know that this sounds like I'm oversimplifying it, but if you have your requirements and you know what the big contenders are on the systems to use, you can just look down your list and say, okay, this checks the box, this checks the box, this one doesn't, and this one has some of my nice to haves, and you can compare them against each other. Also, I have to give a plug to Bob because that's what he does. So if you're not sure, bring in Bob. But what if you aren't sure about your requirements? You go to make that spreadsheet and you have no idea what to put on it. Amanda, can you go to the next slide, please? These examples here, these visuals here, they're not meant to be overwhelming. It's just meant to give an example of what the big picture of information looks like. So when you're not sure about your requirements, it's good to think about what is the flow of information. So between people, between departments, between systems, really every input of information should have an output of information. And understanding the flow of the information and where you want to make it more efficient or cut out steps should help to drive your requirements and create a balance of workflow. And Amanda, you can go to the next slide. So tactically, how is this something that you can get started on? Listing out your requirements and knowing that flow of information is good, but if you don't have your company and the people who work there on board for your digital strategy, it's something that's going to fall flat on its face. So knowing your company's goals and the activities that help you reach those goals and the indicators you need to track in order to make sure you're on track to meet them, that's really important, because you don't want to implement a system that ends up tracking something that doesn't actually get you to a company goal, even if it sounds like it's something that is really cool and it's cutting edge and it's nice to have. But if the end game doesn't get you to your company goal and help you advance to that, it's one of those things that's a waste of your technology investment. Another way to try to hone in on your requirements is to keep an issues list. So a lot of us keep to-do lists, and this is something that they talk about in the book Traction, which is an EOS book, an entrepreneurial operating system. But what they do is they talk about keeping an issues list. So when you have your to-do list, and you might say like, okay, I have to send out a weekly report this week. Your issue should be, I have to spend 3 hours sending a weekly report. How do we get rid of that and instead automate it? So that's an example of like a quick example of an issue. And keeping a responsibilities and deliverables matrix for your team helps keep team members focused, keeps them aligned with the big picture, basically. Gives them the ability to identify what is in their zone so that they know what you're expecting of them, what's within their wheelhouse. And when they know what is in their zone, it gives them, it's like this internal culture, this latitude that happens where they know what's in their zone, so they then come up with ideas on how they can improve it. And they may even bring up to you as the company owner, like things that you didn't even know were happening. So they might say, did you know that I spend X hours a week doing this thing that is my responsibility? I think I have a way to avoid that. And they come up with solutions on their own. So, but people don't do that if they're not really, really clear on what their responsibilities are and what they're trying to drive towards for a company goal. Everybody will want to do that more efficiently if it's outlined for them and they know what they're responsible of. And this visual is an example of a project plan for an implementation. So basically, another tool that you can use so that your project doesn't hit that statistic of failing is making sure that all of the pieces of the project are accounted for. And like basically, you don't have to map it out in a timeline like this, but even if you just had that left-hand side, that list of tasks, and you know that task 5 has to come before task 30 can start, that's enough to really keep you on track and keep the team going for an implementation.
Great. We have a question. You mentioned indicators. Can you give an example of what an indicator is?
Yeah, actually I have, so indicators are great to keep track of your company goals. And I think I actually put something in the appendix of this slide. If I remember right, I think it's slide 14, Amanda. Would you be able to go to that one?
Sure.
Now you're going for advanced capabilities, Erica.
Sorry, I'm gonna throw that on you. Yeah, indicators. Okay, so on that third bold bullet point there, it says, what are leading and lagging indicators? Example, let's say that your goal is to get $500,000 in new sales for Q2. We all know that keeping track of the revenue that's coming in is a great indicator of your success, but there's the leading indicator that says, are you going to actually reach that goal? And then there's that lagging indicator of getting contracts signed and getting the money in the door. So a leading indicator for you might be the number of prospects that are contacted, maybe the number of ads that are run, and the number of follow-ups up to your network, which then the next step is from there, we go to how many sales appointments were booked from that, and then how many contracts were signed, and then your revenue. So knowing your indicators, it's important to know those leading beginning indicators as well as those lagging ones, because you want to have a good tracking system in place for the leading ones, and you want your team to know what you're expecting of them in those leading indicators so they can actually deliver on the performance that you're expecting.
Erica, can I just jump in? And you gave such a great example. I'll actually say that in the interactions I'm having on the sales and marketing side, this is the biggest gap that clients have or prospects have or people that we work with have, is that they generally come in with a very vague goal. I had somebody who said they wanted to get to a certain number of social media followers. And as much as, I'm a marketing guy, I've been a marketing guy my whole life, that is a very painful success metric because that doesn't correlate to your business, your actual business results, right? You can't actually put likes in the bank. So what I like to always do is set a very clear goal and then have these leading and lagging indicators tell you whether you're headed in the right direction. I think it's the #1 gap that I experience on a day-to-day basis, because people say that they want something, but they can't really articulate why. And until you get to a business level metric, which is revenue, profitability, total cost, or something like that, it's really hard to map a solution to that type of problem. Have you guys noticed that too? It's just such a great example. I thought maybe add something there.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times when I'm working with clients on implementing new technology or implementing technology that they already have and they just haven't implemented yet, I find that they say, okay, we really want to get like this module of the system working, but they don't know why or what they're going to use it for. So I absolutely run into that all the time.
Yeah, I think we've all seen where it's pretty common among small and mid-market companies to adopt and invest in technology without doing a tie to strategy and having these kinds of conversations ahead of time.
Great, thank you. So I don't know if we have answered your questions yet. If we haven't, please be sure to get those in the questions box. In the meantime, is there anything else that our speakers want to share with us as their final thoughts on digitization, post-COVID, anything that you'd like to share before we get to final questions?
I know some of the stuff that we presented can seem overwhelming, especially if you're in one of those categories where you're not accelerating your adoption of technology right now. I think we're all in agreement by saying start somewhere and keep it simple. Making some progress and iterative progress over the next year is a lot better than waiting till it's absolutely perfect. But just make sure that you're tying it back to your business strategy and know why you're making an investment, just like you would in anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if you don't have the technology yet or the money to invest in technology, you're still able to invest in making sure that your process will align with fitting into a technology solution in the future.
Thank you. We did actually have one question come in, and is there a difference between B2B and B2C and what you need to do?
I'll take that from the sales and marketing side. Yeah, absolutely. So we didn't put it. I may have mentioned it, but I didn't specifically put it in the slides. I'm seeing an absolute explosion in e-commerce sites and requests. I think there's a couple reasons for that. It's obvious, right? So when for example, we do business with some food companies who get distribution in grocery stores and retail stores, and so when nobody's going to retail stores or grocery stores or restaurants, there's an explosion in e-commerce. Obviously, Amazon is famously increasing billions of dollars in their stock every day because it's super easy to jump on your phone, place your order, and have it there in 2 days. I think that extends itself to groceries. So again, Whole Foods has done a great job. So many retailers have done a great job of doing curbside delivery and those types of things. What I think mid-market and smaller businesses need to do is at least have the bare minimum for their e-commerce presence as well, if you're on the B2C type of side. Again, it's amazing to me how accessible some of those types of technologies are and how easy they are to implement, because again, the cost is going down. The interesting thing is that with Amazon and other similar websites taking off, the expectation from a consumer perspective has skyrocketed. It's the Amazon effect. Everybody just thinks it's going to be 2 days, that it'll be there in 2 days and it'll be free shipping, right? And so adjusting your technology to match what the consumer trend is and what the consumer expectation is a mandatory. So maybe we didn't elaborate on the B2C dynamic, but yeah, I think that's a big difference that I'm noticing. I don't know if on the back end of things, if that adds any thoughts, Erica or Bob.
As far as I go, the B2B and the B2C, I just see it as the information flows, whether it's going to another company or whether it's going to the customer, the end customer. So on my side, I still think that the same thing applies.
Absolutely agree.
Great, thank you. We don't have any other questions right now, but if you think of anything, if any of our attendees today, participants, think of anything after this, please feel free to reach out to anybody you see on this slide. Their contact information is there for you. As mentioned, we'll share this presentation with you afterwards. And if you, like I said, if you get some questions, we'll respond to those personally. We would really appreciate it if you could provide feedback on today's webinar. We obviously review it and look at it and try to improve for the next one. Any one of these individuals are also happy to do individual consultations, no strings attached if you want to reach out to them as well. Our and marketing webinar, the next one, is how mid-market companies can emerge stronger post-pandemic. This is actually a series, and so this is the first one of multiple webinars about helping these companies emerge stronger. It is August 18th from 12 to 12:45, and you can register at that very long and difficult link below, but we'll also send that in the follow-up email, so you're welcome to do that. We haven't had any other questions come in, so thank you for your time today. Thank you to our presenters for joining us. We look forward to the next webinar and seeing you again soon. So with that, that concludes our webinar today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.